Type 4, 1060 been transmitted.
Welcome to Burnt Out. The Burnt Out podcast shares stories of firefighters, emergency medical personnel, and other first responders around the world to create a pathway to save lives. The stories you will hear are real and may be disturbing to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised. Your sponsors today are Turning Point Madison County and Code Green. Burnt Out is an outreach of the worldwide peer support. Visit burntoutpodcast.org for more information on any of our sponsors. And now I'd like to introduce you to your host to Burnt Out, a 33-year retired veteran of the fire department, Skip O.
Sean, thank you for the introduction. I'd like to welcome everybody to Burnt Out Podcast, and I'd like to welcome my good friend Jason Howard. Jason Howard is a former firefighter paramedic for many years. He's also had his own struggles and demons in a dark place, but he's more than a conqueror. Jason is the director of the Turning Point Madison County and also with the COST program here in Indiana. So Jason, we'd like to welcome you to the show.
Well, thank you, Skip. I'm honored to be able to be a part of your podcast.
Well, Jason, could you give the listeners just a little glimpse of your life, your family, just a little glimpse, and then we'll go on?
That's always a tough question when you get into it. I grew up with a great family, my mother, my father, my sister, and I. Through that found myself in EMS very early. I was actually a high school cadet. So I got on the ambulance very, very early. And with that, it's just kind of been a whirlwind experience over the last 30 years, I'd have to say, to lead me here.
You're an old guy.
Well, when you start at 17 years old, those years add up real quick.
All right, Jason, what else? Once you get on the fire department stuff, where'd you go from there?
With anything early in the career, you just want to get on a fire department. And I found myself, we early on got on as some reserves on some fire departments, made it to a major municipality, and found myself in a medical condition. I had a seizure, and through that seizure, I dislocated both my shoulders. And so naturally the pension board said, hey, you can carry a stretcher, but you can't swing an axe, so you got to go. Through that, then I have a background. I went to college for a business degree. So I found myself kind of getting involved in more of an operation standpoint of ambulance and fire operations. But ultimately, I ended up retiring out as a flight medic, which was one of the greatest experiences I think that I could have ever have done. I spent 4 or 5 years in fixed-wing aircraft flying all over the country. We were the nation's only charity air ambulance, so we went out and did essentially missionary work, just trying to help people who were in financial constraints or couldn't afford the 6 figures it takes to be flown back home from one part of the U.S. to another. So that was just, that's one of those pillars of, putting a feather in my cap. That was just a great, great experience.
Well, Jason, I tell you what, that sounds like a great experience. Like for a lot of us, life is going well. Things are clicking and going real good. And then all of a sudden something happens. What was that something for you?
When I identified it, or when I truly felt it, I was on a ground-based ambulance. I was actually filling in for somebody, and it was 2 or 3 days before Christmas. And I had been a paramedic. I'd been on an ambulance for over 20 years. You've seen it all, you've done it all. And lo and behold, we get a call for a shooting, self-inflicted shooting. And so as we're responding out there, I felt true fear. I felt fear that I had never felt before as an EMS provider of what am I going to encounter? What am I going to see? And how am I going to use my skills to save this person's life? So responding to this scene, I remember keep looking at the CAD system in the ambulance thinking, okay, I'm just hoping I can go out and pronounce this person. But it was that fear of having to perform that I had just never experienced in my life. And that really set me up to say, okay, I'm kind of in the downfall of things, especially in mental health, that things aren't going good right now. I've done these runs, 10, 20 times before in my career. Now, all of a sudden, I've got a feeling that I've never felt. And it's that thing that you have, and we all know as practitioners of fire and EMS, when you have your first couple of runs, fresh out of the gate, you start feeling, oh my gosh, the responsibility is on me, and you feel that fear. You don't feel that 20 some years into your career. And so that was really a big thing for me, especially looking back on things to say, okay, that was the pivotal moment.
Well, Jason, when you had that moment, a lot of us run to different things. For me, it was alcohol and drugs, sex, and, numerous other things. Can you relate to any of those?
Oh, absolutely. I think throughout our entire career, because we live in such a high stress environment, number one, sex is always, you see that in all the first responders. We all gravitate to that. And, there's reasons why when we break it down and we see, and it's just that acceptance and those different aspects that we get into. But I also found myself searching for numbness. Because you don't want to feel that fear, and you don't want to feel those emotions that are there, because it's not fun. And so ultimately I'd found myself getting into the narcotics on the ambulance. We carried several different things, but fentanyl was the biggest part of it. And so I had put myself in a position where it was like, I don't want to feel this. I don't want to feel this fear. I don't want to feel any other emotion outside of just being void. We can back that story up, and I'm sure you'll understand this too, as along with a lot of, our other first responders that listen to this. The big problem throughout our entire careers, it comes down to sleep. And a lot of times we spend a lot of time chasing sleep. The general public, they look at it, we work 24 hours, and they're like, oh, you get paid to sleep. We do, but at the end of the day, you're not getting good sleep.
That's only the engine guys.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, but you're constantly waiting for the tones to drop, and so it's always sitting on edge. And then when you go home, you still have that, as I say, Pavlov's dog, to where you're still waiting on that razor's edge. And so for me, that was really the start of, probably when I look at the addiction side of it, I was always searching to try to find sleep. And then that just manifested over to, not only am I not sleeping now I need to just be numb during the day. And so, these things just really put two and two together and really led to the falling out of stuff.
Okay, Jason, go to the last week on the job. Kind of describe a little bit leading up to when you reached out for help.
Well, my last week on the job was one of those things where I was really in bad shape mental health wise. I was married at the time. We were probably in our 5th, 6th year of marriage. My wife had some mental health issues, undiagnosed, but what we got into was, not only are you dealing with the emotions of what you have to do and the people that we encounter, all throughout my shifts, then I'm getting phone calls from the wife about, oh, this needs at home, this, that, and that. And it's like, I can't be there to deal with it. So it truly put me in a spot where it was like, I need to just be numb. I can't focus on my job when I have all these other aspects. Another component was I was constantly gone. So I was flying at the time, I was picking up extra shifts, and we all know how that goes, but I could spend 4 or 5 days straight away from home working or being gone on the aircraft. And it all just kind of culminated to I've got a real problem. And number one, I've been doing something wrong. I've been getting in the ambulance. I've been, getting on those narcotics. I shouldn't be doing that. I needed help. And so it just came down to the fact where one day it was like, I've had enough of it. Either they're going to catch me and I'm going to go to jail, or I need to get this situated and get the help I need. So through that course of probably that last week was a lot of soul searching, and a lot of it too is, how do I handle this situation? What's going to be best for me? But on the same token, how do I get the help I need? And I didn't know what the help I needed was. So I went to my employers and, just laid it out to them saying, hey, here's where I'm at. I'm in a real bad place. And gave them, we sat in a room for about 2 hours, and I just unloaded all the information to them. And so they sat there and were like, we're going to help you, tell us everything, but we're here to help you. We're here to back you up. And at the end of the day, nobody called to help me. And the state police showed up in my driveway and arrested me. And I was charged over 3 counties here in Indiana for various crimes related to narcotics. Through that process, you're already in a mental health deficit. So through the process, not only did I lose my career, I didn't get the help I needed that I was promised. And now I've got pending charges, but to make it even worse, I've got the news who sat outside my house. So the day the police were coming, I knew the warrants were coming out. I'd already called the jail and said, hey, I'm going to turn myself in. We had it all worked out. But the news was outside my house for about 8 hours that day. And they actually called the state police and said, hey, will you come pick him up by 4 o'clock so we can make a 5 o'clock news deadline? And, that was tough in the aspect that now I've got to deal with the public blowback. So when you're already in a deficit of, I could end my life. Now all of a sudden you've got all these other, with the internet, with everything there is, now my story's out there. And, one of our local TV stations, they ran my story 12 times the day after I was arrested. Every time I went back to court, they would run my story. So I couldn't, for the life of me, get ahead. I would go and find a job, my story would run, and then the employers would come back and say, we just can't utilize you with what you have, what you're looking at. So it was super, super tough to not only overcome what I thought I was getting help for, but then have that compounded through the media. So when you talk about being in a downward spiral, and knowing that life is just not where you need it to be, and you don't know what direction is up, I was truly at that point. And, for the longest time, I carried a bullet in my pocket. And that bullet, I always told myself, I can either bury this in my head or I can bite it. And last night I was on a meeting and we were talking about this same story. And I told him, I still have that bullet. It's locked up in my safe. But when I pull it out, you can literally see teeth marks on it from where I did put that in and bite it to get through, the scenarios I had in front of me.
Sure. Well, Jason, here you are. You're in back of a state police officer's car. You went to jail, processed, looking for jobs, not getting jobs. When did that turning point for you? When did it start going up?
It came down to me. And it came down to me looking at things and saying, either I can let this beat me, or I can do what I can to invest in myself to turn this around. Because I knew I wasn't a bad person. Regardless of what anybody else saw or thought through the media, I knew inside me I wasn't a bad person. And I knew through everything that I've dealt with in my life that it all falls on me. Either I can make it or I can break it. And so it was the fact of I'm going to move forward. I'm going to turn this situation into a positive, and I'm going to make sure that nobody else has to go through what I went through. And so there was a transition there where it was like, okay, I've got to pick myself up. And so I essentially invested in myself and said, nobody else is going to do this. Nobody else put me where I was at, and nobody else is going to lift me out of it. It comes down to me. So it was really through that sheer determination to say, okay, how do I find the solutions I need to the problems that I have? And, I found one of the greatest therapists I think we have in this area. And he, it took us some time to develop that relationship. But at the end of the day, he came in and tiptoed through my head and really made me think and put me into a spot where it was like, okay, my first couple of meetings with him were, I'm not an addict. I'm not an addict. And then we came down to, okay, I am an addict. What I did was addict. I have those addict behaviors. So it took a lot of finding out who I was with the help of, and who my therapist was.
Did you ever leave his office? That damn therapist don't know what he's talking about.
There was a few times I'd walk away and be like, what the hell just happened there?
He's sneaky.
he is very sneaky, but I love that man to death. And because of that man, every day I walk on this earth now is a bonus day, because without him, I wouldn't be where I am. And I probably wouldn't be alive, because I don't know how I would have overcame those stressful environments. And he was right there through it all, and was always put me in a spot to make sure I think about what I've got to do. And it's amazing when we look back that, and I think you can say the same. We can all say the same when we find that recovery. Here I am, maybe 4.5 years later, and I've overcame those obstacles. And it's a great feeling when you can look back. But more than anything, I can sit here and tell you my story, and I can dive into the parts that, people don't want to talk about. I did all these things, and I was wrong in what I did, but I'm now able to use that to help others.
Jason, what was, how we met? Could you tell them what it was your first job that somebody trusted you after all this?
Well, what I found, number one, was I had to work for myself. And so in doing that, I had a lot of idle time on my hands. So I started kicking around trying to create a nonprofit that helps with the mental health advocacy of our first responders. I remarketed myself, rebranded myself. I took some money out of my account and said, okay, here's what I'm going to do, and kind of set a pathway for it. Through that, I'd found a position working with, it was a local inpatient treatment facility for substance abuse. And it was something brand new to me. I never even thought I would be in that. And so it came out to, I was a business development officer with the local, like I said, treatment facility, and was still trying to make all these things go. But what really appealed me to them was they had a first responder program. And through all my pathways, it was like, that's where I want to be. I want to help our first responders too. I'd approached you, and everybody knows Skip's name through the community. Like me, good or bad, everybody knows old Skipper. But I knew you for worldwide peer support, and you had taken the same vision that I had, and you'd made it successful. And I knew it was something that I wasn't going to be able to be as successful as you were, but I wanted to be a part of what you were doing. But more than anything, I wanted to be able to provide those services that I didn't have to me at the time. And so you and I met at the firehouse. You were on duty, and from there, it just, I don't know if you want to say it went uphill or downhill, but that relationship was formed, and through that relationship, I feel we've done a lot of great things, and helped a lot of people.
Just to let everybody know, Jason Howard, not only he's a part of the Worldwide Peer Support Organization that helps placement of first responders around the United States. and also in England too. We flew somebody from England. Jason was involved in that, helping out. So, Jason, I love that you used your brokenness to share with other people so they can open the door and walk through to recovery. I love the way you share. I love your heart, where you come from. And, one thing with me and Jason, we don't always agree. But at the end of the day, we try to do what's best for an organization or for the mission that we're doing. Jason, could you give everybody a glimpse of what you do here in Madison County, here in Indiana? Kind of your daily, you wear many hats. Could you let them know how many hats you're wearing?
I do wear many hats, and sometimes I forget which hat's which. The main thing that I have right now is I am the director of Turning Point Madison County, which is a peer recovery hub for substance abuse and mental health. But through that, I've been able to work with our local sheriff's department. And we got quite a few grants, but what we're looking at doing is creating a secondary response option. So as most people know, in the first responder realm, when we go out, probably 60 to 70% of our call volume is going to be what's considered a mental emotional type thing. It's not something where necessarily a crime's there, but there's something, there's just something that's there. And so when we send all our resources to the scenes, we've got two options, and that's going to be the jail or the hospital. It's not always the best option for these people. And so what we're trying to do, and it's a nationwide thing, is we've decided to create what we're calling mobile integrated health, which is kind of a community paramedicine program. But with that, what we'll do is we'll respond to the scenes of our substance abuse calls. We'll respond to the scenes of our mental emotional calls, those calls where you have somebody maybe in a bipolar crisis. And our police officers aren't adapted, and it's nothing against them, but they aren't necessarily adapted to deal with mental health or know how to break down when someone's in a crisis or in a manic stage, that they're not going to comply to orders, that they need more of a de-escalation, and we need to figure out how to help them mentally over just turfing them somewhere. So through the COST program, which is Community Outreach and Support Team that I've been able to develop, we are going to take an EMT and a paramedic, put them in a vehicle with a therapist or a case manager. And we're going to be able to respond to these scenes in real time and try to work with these individuals to see how we can find them the care and the placement they need from where they're at. And how do we do that? By helping, not overcrowd our jails and our ER systems, because at the end of the day, that's what we see a lot of is, our police, our EMS, our fire, they show up and they're like, we really just don't know what to do, but we got to do something. And so they send them someplace that necessarily we don't need to be, where how can we adapt to that right now? So it's been an exciting ride, seeing all these moving pieces come together. And just to be able to get back involved somewhat into the field that I loved so much, but more than anything, to have the support of individuals that 4 years ago would have rather have seen me locked in jail and thrown away the key.
Sure. I tell you, it's amazing how things, the people that you thought were against you later on in life, they're for you and helping you out. We talk about, me and you, I couldn't do anything without a team. I'm not the brightest star in the sky. Thank God that I got people like Marissa out in New Jersey, our vice president, and then our treasurer in Pennsylvania, Chuck, and then all the rest of the board members scattered around the United States and in England helping me out. Jason, you want to talk a little bit about your team, and then for us, what kind of team you got around you?
Well, and you're right. You can't do anything unless you have a team. Good, bad, sometimes it's still a team, and you've got to, people are going to have strengths and weaknesses. And so what I found through the team is we've got to focus on our strengths and try to let those weaknesses go. I've got weaknesses too, and I try to bring people in that will help me on my weak sides. The best team I ever had was when I was teamed with you, because there was nothing we couldn't accomplish. So it just comes down to those type things that you just put the right people where they need to be, and you can overtake the world. Now, I will say there's a comedian out there that always says, all you need is three bad motherfuckers. You have those three bad motherfuckers, and you can take the world over. And I truly believe it. And with you and I, we walk the same pathways a lot of times, but at the end of the day, we're two or three bad motherfuckers that are going out there saying, "Hey, let's make a difference and let's do this."
Let's get it on.
That's just it.
All right, Jason, one couple other things. There's a medic or a firefighter at the station or back of the ambulance after a bad run. Everybody know what the ambulance looks like after a code. The police officers know what a crime scene looks like when somebody's been shot or stabbed. And they have to go back. The police officers, we got a crew to go back to. The police officers usually go sit in the car by themselves. Or the military guys that's been in battle and now they're here sitting in their one-room apartment with a gun in front of them. What are you going to tell that person, Jason, right now about getting help?
I've been there. And you can make the change. It really comes down to giving people support. What I found through my battles was you feel like you're isolated in a bubble and it's just you. And the stigma that we have, and I always call it the alpha mentality. We live on a razor's edge, and living on that razor's edge, we don't want anything to change that, and we want to be there. And so through being there, we're not going to give up vulnerability. But you can't change until you become vulnerable. We as the alpha men and women doing what we do, we don't cry. We don't show emotion. For me, I didn't know any other emotion outside of anger. Because that puts us into what we would feel would be weakness. And so it's talking to these individuals to say, it's okay to be weak. It's okay to process what we just saw and did and realizes it touches you in a way that's different than what we want to show, that bravado and our outside, moxie of we're these tough people. We need to know how to cry too. We need to know how, when we're beat, when there is something that is much bigger than us, that we can't control it, how do we go to our other individuals? How do I go to Skip, who is the sergeant on the engine, and say, Skip, that last run affected me? And with that, how do we sit down at the kitchen table and talk about it and be able to get up afterwards and still have the same respect for each other, knowing that when that next call comes in, we're still going to perform without looking at what we just said as weakness.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate you being on here. I'm going to always try to end a podcast with, is there a statement or a phrase or a quote from somebody that sticks in your mind that you always recall, that keeps you going? Is there anything that you can think of right now?
Always push forward.
Cool. Always push forward. Well, Jason Howard, thank you for being on this podcast. And if you want to know about Turning Point Madison County, go to burnoutpodcast.org and click on Turning Point. You can get a hold of Jason that way. We also like to thank our new sponsor, came on board yesterday, Code Green. You can also go, they're based out of Southern California. They deal with first responders, mental health. And Jason, thank you for being who you are and what you do here in Indiana, Madison County, and throughout the United States and England. We really appreciate you.
Well, Skip, number one, I want to thank you for allowing me to be on your new podcast here and share my story. But more than anything else, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for you too have walked through that valley of a shadow. You've been there. And you are inspiration to a lot of people, especially me, as we go out there and say, okay, we're not going to let our fellow brothers and sisters fall on our watch. So I want to let you know how much of an inspiration you are and how much I appreciate you and our relationship. And thank you so much for what you're doing for our first responders and bringing awareness.
Thank you, Jason. And I'd like to tell everybody, worldwidepeersupport.org. Go to worldwidepeersupport.org. They're the organization being Jason we volunteer for. There's 3 support Zoom meetings a week. We got a family support Zoom meeting on Thursday. If you need any help 24/7, you can contact us through there. But Jason, thank you. And I'd like to thank all the listeners. If you need help, just let us know. Remember, go home, shut the radio off, and get some sleep. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Burnt Out Podcast. Your host for Burnt Out is Skip O. Produced by Sean P. Neal, a Two on the Lobster production. Tune in every week for fresh episodes of Burnt Out. And visit burntout.org for more information.